Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to the previous speakers for their presentations, Peter, Duncan, John, and Rebecca. This is all a little bit weird. I must admit, speaking into a computer and certainly pre-recording something. So I'm conscious that I'm the last speaker before the actual human interaction takes place at the Q&A. So please bear with me. We've got a few slides to run through, and then we'll get stuck into the Q&A. So what I'm here to talk to you about today is basically what a number of Greater Manchester landlords are doing in relation to climate change and retrofit. So that's that. Over to the agenda. First off, just run through a little bit about Procure Plus, who we are and what we do. Hopefully a number of you are already aware of PP, but for those that aren't, just skip over that. Then I want to look at the why do this, why do retrofit, that I ain't going to talk about in the presentation. So the stuff I'm not covering. Again, just to note it, other speakers have probably already talked about it, so don't want to spend too much time or effort on that. I'm then going to look at the challenge to delivering retrofit, or perhaps the perceived challenge, and I'll leave that question hanging there and probably will spark a question or two later on. But we need to look at the challenges as our Greater Manchester collective landlords view it, because that has obviously informed the response that they are taking, which we'll then look into. I want to highlight the Retrofit Accelerator here, which is a particular Greater Manchester Combined Authority initiative running up in GM, and then look at certainly one whole house project, which is known as the Homes as Energy Systems Project. It's European Regional Development Fund funded, hence the teeny tiny EU flags all over this particular presentation. But it gives an indication, or one of the approaches that the landlords are taking to deliver whole house retrofit. And then just a couple of final thoughts, and then done and dusted. Right, so Procure Plus, we are a social housing purchasing and regeneration company. We work with, collectively, I think it is around about 60 landlords up in the north of England, who are responsible for around about 500,600 properties in total. We are a route to market for them for construction, housing related construction, goods and services, property investment, that kind of stuff. We turned over, or more specifically, our customers turned over around about £140 million worth of contracts, I think, through PP last year alone. A number of you guys and ladies in the audience, a number of your landlord organisations use us, whether it's for external contractors delivering works or equally for the supply of materials into the DLO. So we aggregate the volume and demand of all our customers to secure market-leading rates for products and services, but we do not pass 100% of that saving on to the customer. We effectively ring-fence and top slice a bit of that saving and use it to fund training and employment initiatives in the communities where you guys have got stock and operate. So we have a social value charity called Revision that works with local employability groups, community interest companies, other training providers to effectively get people into work. Painting a community centre is nice. Planters are a good thing too. And these are other examples of social value delivered through frameworks. But our view is, if you want to affect real change in an area, give someone a job, and that's what we focus on. So yeah, we aggregate volume, aggregate demand, deliver training and employment initiatives. I think it was over 400 MBQ level 2 apprenticeships, employment outcomes last year as well. So we're doing quite well on that front. And we're delivering a couple of contracts for CITB as well, the Construction Skills Fund Phase 1 and Phase 2. But that's PP. If you want to know more, give us a shout at the back end. Right, so the why do this that I ain't covering? And it's been covered by others elsewhere. It's common knowledge, and I think it's accepted. Hopefully it's accepted science. But it ranges from the micro all the way to the macro. So we have got the things like food poverty, the people that are affected, that live in the properties that you manage, all the way up to sea level rises, acidification of oceans, and other things. Potentially, who knows? We might well see wine production in Wigan if the climate continues to change in the way it is doing. I'm going to buy a parcel of land in Billinge, and hopefully that'll be my retirement fund. But we're not going into that in any more detail than that. Okay, so what is the challenge or perceived challenge to retrofit that landlords have identified, certainly the landlords that we're working with in GM? So the first off is probably the most obvious, and that's the cash one. There's a little business case for current approaches to holistic energy efficiency and retrofit. So we've got the cost of works themselves. We've got the cost of finance, if finance is required to deliver those works. We've got other things to do with loan covenants and reviewing loan books and all these other costs associated with securing the finance. The financial benefit is split. Again, in many cases, landlords are investing. It's the occupant that benefits financially in terms of reduced fuel bills, which is brilliant. But again, it doesn't support the business case specifically that well in many cases. Some elements of retrofit are more viable now. So we still see models that are providing free PV or certainly free PV to the landlord, funded via a power purchase agreement with the occupant. We've got assignment of rights for air source heat pumps and other renewable energy technologies like that, but not for free WI yet. So yeah, the bits and bobs work in their own right, but others don't stack up currently. And equally, there's no real fiscal policy driver for this. The carrots aren't juicy enough and the sticks aren't hard enough, in a nutshell. Moving on to trust and confidence in works. I suppose it's useful to reiterate where landlords are coming from, the journey that they've been through to get to here today. And that's stuff like the new build projects that aren't performing as they were supposed to on paper. So we've got a performance gap in new build. We've got previously schemes that have been delivered like CERT, CESC, ECO, Green Deal, cashback, things of that nature, which might well have, if we're putting it politely, not been delivered as well as they could have done, for example. Preston, case in point, 50 million quid worth of taxpayers' cash being spent on removing and remediating properties that benefited from free EWI a few years back. When you've got, I suppose, work specifications that are designed around and predicated on funding criteria, you don't necessarily get the right solution for the job. Equally, standard industry custom and practice isn't up to scratch still. So on a recent EWI tender that we went to market with, we required and specified below DPC insulation to mitigate and avoid that thermal break at skirting board level. The number of responses we had from supply chain contractors saying there's no funding for this, it's not required, why are you asking for that, it's adding cost to the job. It's not adding cost to the job, it is the job. It just reiterates and underlines that perhaps our supply chain isn't, certainly many elements of it aren't yet able to deliver what needs to be delivered. In terms of clear government policy, well, there isn't one. I think it's fair to say there's a lot of it's historically been stop-start. We've got changes to renewable heat incentives. Some technologies are in, others aren't. We've got stuff being extended. We've got other stuff that isn't. We've got an end target, which is great. 2050 net zero carbon, brilliant. But some support and guidance as to how to get there along the way. Some in between would probably be quite useful. We've equally got competing targets. So just in GM, we've got net zero by 2038. We've got the 2050 target. We've got fuel poverty strategies. We've got this, we've got that. There are a lot of different things that landlords need to get in a row to organise and I think respond to holistically to do this. And equally, there are competing investment priorities. So there's a recognition that not everything can be done in one hit. You might have a roofing program, the roofs are knackered, they need doing. You can't put them off, you've got to spend the cash on it. Can you stretch to EWI at the same time? Well, not if you want to do all the roofs. So there are things like this that need to be taken into account. And that's the challenges as our landlords see it. But it has kind of informed the response. So again, this is very much based on the landlords that we work with up in Greater Manchester. So when it comes to cash, there's a recognition that financial appraisals and business case development and assessing what's value, it needs to change, and it is changing. So on long-term asset investment programs, like boiler upgrades over the next 5 years, there's a recognition that costs for stuff will reduce. It won't with PV. So Swanson's loader graph there on that particular slide. demonstrates that the more stuff you ship, the lower the costs for that item. And yes, it did work for PV. So if you're factoring in a budget for air source heat pump installations, for example, over a 7-year period, you wouldn't use today's costs for year 5, 6 or 7 or 8, maybe even years 3 and 4, based on more volume for stuff, the cost reduced. Equally, there's expectation and exploration of greater collaborative procurement. So rather than one landlord going out for 10 landlords going out for 100. This has been recognised in a Greater Manchester Combined Authority report that was exploring the economic opportunities for supply chain companies that want to sell to social landlords. And yeah, one of the recommendations for that was, work with collaborative procurement organisations, go out together, generate economies and efficiencies in collaborative procurement. We even got a mention, which is nice, but we didn't feed into the report, I hasten to add. So equally, landlords are becoming more aware and exploring new revenue streams from stuff. So it's not about basing an investment decision on something that doesn't exist yet. That'd be a little bit silly, but it is informing, I suppose, and contextualizing some investment decisions. Things like demand side response from renewable energy systems, the potential for heat as a service linked to energy efficiency improvements like insulation upgrades and windows and such like. It's not the most salient point, but it is informing investment decisions. There are other forms of cash that are likely, they are emerging. Equally, looking at whole life costing. So don't just look at the CapEx, look at the OpEx as well. It's very basic, but it's still not done all the time. Something that might cost 25% less than another product, but costs twice as much to run over a 5-year time horizon. Why are people spending money on that? It doesn't make sense. And yes, it's an accepted deficiency in current investment planning, and that's landlords ain't looking at whole life costing, but they are doing now more proactively. And equally, there are wider cashflow benefits that are being recognised and factored in. Are landlords having fewer call-outs to properties that are better performing from an energy efficiency perspective? Things of that nature that are being explored and factored in. So equally, the Greater Manchester landlords came together to form the LCAM, the Low Carbon Asset Managers Group. Kind of does what it says on the slide there. They share best practice, they work together, they respond to consultations as a single voice. They have developed a climate change strategy, which sets out targets, metrics, and all this kind of stuff to help landlords get to this net zero carbon, certainly by the 2038 thing that Andy Burnham wants. And again, the LCAM and sharing knowledge was recognised in that Greater Manchester Combined Authority research. We're involved in that as well, helping to drive things forward, putting our knowledge and learning from previous procurements into future ones. So yeah, get informed, I suppose, which leads on to the next response, and that is specifically targeted at capacity building within landlords' own organisations. So we're talking with David Pierpoint at the minute about putting on Retrofit Accelerator past 2035 certification courses for social landlords. So it's not necessarily saying that the landlord wants to be the coordinator on a project, but it would enable even, a project surveyor or another within that organisation to identify stuff and be able to say, at least with some sort of confidence, I'm not sure about that detail, I'm not sure about the approach that you've employed or suggested for this particular solution. Show me your workings out. Show me how you've mitigated the risk here and things of that nature. And it obviously goes on to inform procurement, individual procurements as well. So with people within the organisation that have got an appreciation that the past 2035 certified, they are retrofit coordinators, would they have passed details like that? I would like to think not. This is a relatively recent EWI scheme from a customer that's come to us. I'm not sure where this one came from. I think it might have been a throwback to CESP. But the thermal bridges, the risk for damage to the fabric of the building from just that roof line alone is quite hideous. Our specifications have been informed over time. We wouldn't have allowed that if a contractor that we'd procured for a customer delivered that, it wouldn't have been in compliance with the spec, there'd be grounds for recourse, but equally with an informed client, they wouldn't have signed it off either. And equally, I suppose the knowledge building, the capacity building thing is informing this concept of whole stock level assessments. So yeah, what can we do over time to get all of our stock to net zero carbon? It's this whole house high level plans. Greater Manchester equally recognised that there's a green growth opportunity here. So Tyndall Centre and other academic institutions, they've done the research that says carbon can be saved more quickly and possibly to a greater extent by having lots of smaller schemes rather than fewer larger ones. Likewise, there's this recognition that the post-COVID-19 recovery will be driven by local SMEs, and DLO contractors working in a local area. This approach favours incremental upgrades. So taking those 2 points together, 1 megawatt of ground mount, employing a few people, putting stuff in a field, or a megawatt of roof-mounted PV, employing a number of different supply chain companies, maybe the DLO themselves, delivers more carbon more quickly and generating more economic growth for a particular local area. Equally, the cyclical asset management approach, which is still very much prevalent, landlords are recognising the ability to incorporate elements of retrofit into it. So, Stockport Homes, case in point, they're doing a re-roofing programme. It makes sense to put the PV on right now. I think they're still going for on-roof rather than in-roof from a cost-benefit perspective. But the fixed cost of the prelims, the SCAF, the access, the resident engagement, all of that stuff is done once. It's more cost-effective to do that, and it's not a dramatic uplift, certainly given the costs for PV when you've got a gang of operatives on a roof re-roofing the thing. Equally, they're looking at the deployment of heat pumps now across all their stock. As of 2023, they ain't going to be installing any more gas. They want to be net zero by 2038. Boiler's got a 15-year lifespan. That is the kind of approach they're doing and they're taking. Incorporating elements of retrofit into the cyclical asset management plan where it makes sense to do so. So the Retrofit Accelerator, what is it? Well, it's still emerging, but in a nutshell, it's a Greater Manchester Combined Authority initiative, and it's being led by the University of Salford. And it brings together a whole host of organisations that have got an interest in retrofit. So that's supply chain companies, we're involved in it. We've got private landlords, so the likes of Bruntwood and Peel Holdings, as well as social landlords, training providers and community groups. And again, recognising some of the challenges that we've already identified. The Accelerator wants to be an independent and expert voice and knowledge hub for retrofit in the region. And I know they're going to be talking to other organisations about working more collaboratively at a national level. They're looking to commission research into savings to social landlords. So again, there've been a few pieces of paper produced by other organisations that say, do all this to your properties, and the organisational savings to a landlord are X. They're often based, unfortunately, or depending on your view, on London landlords with different property markets, different considerations. The GM landlords want to know what the implications are for them, for the vernacular, as it were, and our local property market. So they're commissioning work on that to help inform the business case. They're developing a route to market as well for whole house retrofit, for public sector supported or financed retrofit, and that could be in the private and the social housing sector. And equally importantly, I hasten to add, they're developing a training centre to complement and facilitate this retrofit delivery. If we want more retrofit, we need a supply chain that knows what they're doing. It's a bit of a catch-22. So yeah, let's look at skills as we go along. That moves into one of the whole house projects, which is informing the Retrofit Accelerator, and that's the Homes Energy Systems project. Brings together all of these people. We're leading it. There are a couple of other landlords actually. So One Manchester and Moscow St Vincent's are now on board. We're just waiting for formal sign-off from MHCLG. But what's Hayes doing? A load of stuff really. So over 1,000 interventions, primarily single or two measures to a property. So 13.5 million quid's worth of investment in total, lots of carbon saved, and exploring some of these emerging revenue streams, so demand side response and things of that nature. But in relation to this presentation, it's the last bullet there. 26 properties are going to benefit a whole house retrofit. Not a vast number of interventions, but it's still 1.2, 1.3 million quid's worth of work. What actually is that? Well, it's this. Our definition of whole house is certainly very much technology agnostic. It's get to net zero carbon use, or as close to, within a fixed budget, which is 50k for the social housing landlords. There's going to be loads and loads of monitoring, but management by exception. So it's not an energy performance contract or anything like that, or an energy performance guarantee. We were told not to do that by the funder, but we have the ability to look at what the design said it would do and what has actually happened in real life, and investigate if there are discrepancies. So it's all going to be PAS 2035 compliant, and Retrofit Works, our delivery partner, is ensuring that that's the case. But ultimately, it's down to contractor design teams to develop the most cost-effective solution. It could be loads of fabric improvement and a bit of PV, or it could be loads of M&E stuff and a little bit of fabric. We're not being prescriptive, but the design teams will need to evidence that the proposals are fit for purpose and will not stuff the property up, and obviously comply with PAS 2035. Basically, we want to, again, inform that business case, demonstrate to the wider public sector that there are ways to do this. And it's, yeah, there are a number of different options to suit each local circumstance. So finally, before the Q&A, the landlord's position up in GM is that, yeah, there are real challenges, but they've acknowledged them. They're trying to address them, not ignore them, or just carry on with business as usual. In terms of finances, it's account for everything. So they are actively progressing total cost of acquisition models, getting a better understanding of cashable and other non-cashable, including reputational impacts and implications of making an investment decision or not, and factoring those into their decision-making processes. They are informing themselves, they're getting upskilled to become an informed client, so that they are better placed to avoid those unintended consequences or call them out if they see them happening on site, but equally avoid and not get bamboozled by greenwash and other things. And I suppose lastly, they are taking the lead. There's a recognition up in GM that if you know what you're talking about, and if this is still an emerging space, if you're confident you can help steer it, you can steer where we get to. And equally, I suppose, when retrofit and greater energy efficiency, it becomes more mandatory, those that have got a handle on it will be better placed to deal with it when that happens. So that was it. I'm ever so slightly over, but that's it. That's me. Thank you very much. And yeah, over to the Q&A. Thank you.